live. Senator, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Senator, you've been widely reported and widely seen as the big winner that came out of last night's debate, and I just wonder how you feel this morning.
A little tired, but otherwise, you know, look, we've had two other debates that we thought we did well in as well, and this is just one more step in the process of deciding who we're going to nominate to be our to represent the Republican Party in what is perhaps the most important election in a generation. And so we feel good about it, but there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, the election wasn't decided last night, that's for sure.
No, but there are people who are trying to figure out where things are headed at this point and figure out where some of the big financial backers are headed. Have you heard from people? Have you heard from people on the ground, either big backers or from grassroots people who are ready and willing to donate more to the campaign at this point?
Yeah, we've had a real good response, as I said, both from people that were still shopping for a candidate, both voter-wise, and people that donate to campaigns. And so we'll let our staff handle all of that. But we're going to continue to do what we're doing, which is to hopefully have a chance to talk to people about what I would do, what sort of policies I would promote and put in place if I had the opportunity to be president of the United States. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And I've always been confident about what that will mean in terms of support, especially in the long run.
I know it's very early there, 2 hours earlier where you are, and I know it was a very late night for you, and we do appreciate your getting up early. I'd heard that you were disappointed with the debate last night. What bothered you the most?
Yeah, you know, CNBC is always where I tune in and others to talk about deep issues regarding finances of individuals, countries, and generally the world. And I thought we were going to get into more of those questions last night. I mean, questions about what do we do about the national debt? What should the Fed be doing or not doing at this moment? Is there another bubble out there waiting in the economy? What about this issue of the slowdown in global emerging markets and the impact it's having on both China and ultimately the United States as well? I thought last night was going to be the night that we got into deep policy discussions because our country needs to hear that. I mean, these are important issues that are being decided, and I just didn't think enough of that was covered. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do that again because these are important issues, and it's important to know that the people that are running for office understand these issues and what their ideas are about it.
I would agree. I think it's difficult to do that with 10 people on stage, particularly when you're limited to 2 hours.
I know, I understand.
But what are the issues that...
But the questions weren't even about that.
Well, I think part of debate is trying to make sure you're vetting candidates and letting people know about their background, almost a job interview on one level. But I do agree with you that we need more debate about these very important issues. Let's talk about one issue that you think we didn't get to last night that you'd like to talk about. Senator, I'm sorry, is there an issue you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to play a clip of an issue that you wanted to ask.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, look,
I'm opening the floor to you. I'd like to hear about something we didn't get to.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. It's an open-ended. Well, that's great. But listen, there's a couple points I'd like to talk about. I mean, one of the issues that is confronting our country today is you have millions of people that are struggling. Wages really haven't climbed in this country fast enough. And the cost of living over the last 10 or 15 years has increased primarily because there are new costs associated with the 21st century. For example, in 35 out of 50 states, child care is more expensive than going to college. So what are we going to do to raise wages in America again? And it has to be the combination of making us the easiest and best place in the world to create the best paying jobs of the 21st century and combine that with allowing people to acquire the skills they need for those better paying jobs. We have a massive disconnect in this country between the skills the 21st century requires for higher paying jobs and what many of our people have. So I really thought I wanted to get into how are we going to revolutionize higher education, not just to make it more affordable, but to actually make it relevant. And so we've got really good bipartisan ideas about reinvigorating vocational training in this country, creating alternatives to traditional college through competency-based learning. And also providing students more information about the degrees they're seeking and the job prospects before they take out a loan. I really thought that's important because if we don't close the skills gap, there is no way we can close the opportunity gap that is leading to the income gap that we see here in America in the 21st century.
I'd agree with you entirely. However, that's a long-term fix for some of these issues. And there are people on stage, some of whom agree with the idea of raising minimum wage. Are there things that you would do in the near term or things that you could see to try and get in at that inequality gap that would happen much more quickly?
Yeah, I mean, the inequality gap is a direct result of an opportunity gap. And by and large, there are jobs out there in America that pay a lot more than minimum wage, and they are unfilled because there are not enough people with the skills they need to fill that job. So we can fill that gap. It'll take some time. Good public policy isn't instant and overnight. And so it would require things like making vocational training more of a priority, having a president that actually elevates vocational training in a public discourse, but also opening up federal financial aid so that a 16-year-old can go to school in the high school in the morning and trade school in the afternoon and graduate as a welder. Welders make more than philosophers, and we have a shortage of that in this country. So and these are bipartisan ideas. These are things I've worked with across the aisle to put in place to help our workers acquire the skills they need for the better paying jobs. And here's the other. We have to make America a more attractive place for investment, which is why I've proposed some of the things I've proposed, whether it's a territorial system of taxation so we can bring back there's $2 trillion of American corporate cash sitting overseas and then keep it here for the long term, whether it's a globally competitive business tax rate for all business sizes, whether it's allowing businesses to immediately expense what they invest in their businesses, and of course regulatory reform through the regulatory budget that I've proposed that limits the growth and scope of regulations. Make our country the best place in the world to create the best paying jobs, make it easier for our people to acquire the skills they need for those better paying jobs. You're going to have an economic renaissance. And people who today make $8 or $9 an hour are going to be making $30 or $40 an hour.
Yeah, you know, Senator, I heard a lot last night about entitlement, and maybe you didn't get totally into the weeds on every single economic issue, but I heard more last night than in the previous two debates. Now, I understand it's always fun to talk about moderators, et cetera, but when you have 10 guys and one gal, but when you have 10 and there's some that are at 1 and 2 and 3%, you can ask questions all you want, and you're still going to have people trying to make a name for themselves or trying to break out. And there's no way you can ask a substantive question and just go down the list and get an answer out of 10. Did you not know that Governor Bush was ready for you with that question? Was that not abundantly apparent that he was ready with that no matter what a moderator would have done? That was going to come out. He had the French work week line all ready to go. I was wondering, did you have the response ready, or are you just that quick on your feet?
No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we know what people are saying. It isn't going to change my campaign. I mean, I'll address it, and we'll move back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
Well, with 10 guys, how do you weed out, as a country, how do we weed out guys that aren't going to be there in 6 months? That's part.
I know, and I understand your point. I understand the point
that you're going to see this between people. This is going to be my night to take on this guy. This is going to be my night where I'm going to try and make a big splash. And I mean, it is what it is.
Well, no, I understand that. It's an unusual. Yeah, it's an unusual thing, right? 10 people on a stage, I get it. It is what it is. I can't change it. I'm a candidate. I just got to continue to focus on issues. I just wish that we had more questions about some of this. You talk about entitlement. I think at the end of the debate, we actually got into a little bit of a discussion about entitlement reform. I thought that was a positive aspect of it, and I said that. And it's an important issue,
Mike Huckabee did everybody a favor, because that dysfunctional GOP family, at the end, it was sort of, Andrew always talks about a kumbaya moment, but when Huckabee said, I'll take any of these guys up here they're doing this for a reason. They're not doing it for notoriety. They're doing it because they're, patriots or whatever and want to try and help the country. And I thought that sort of brought it full circle in terms of, all the grousing and everything else. You know who the enemy is.
Yeah, again,
you should know who the enemy is as it's not the guy standing next to you.
Yeah, look, I think it's legitimate to discuss policy differences on entitlement reform. There are policy differences among us, and we should have a conversation about it. Because it's an important issue. I care passionately about it. I said it last night. My mother, 100% of her income is Social Security, and she's also on Medicare, and I don't want anything that's bad for her. And I think the important point is when I talk about reforming Social Security and Medicare, I'm not talking about people that are on it now. We don't need to do anything to change it for them. They can stay the way it is, and we can make improvements to it for them. The changes are going to have to be for people like me. I'm 44 years old. I'm 25 years away from retirement. That program won't exist for me. The math doesn't lie. It will not exist if we leave it exactly the way it is. There's going to have to be some change to it. What change should there be? And my argument is if we act now, we can actually make those changes in a way that are not overly disruptive for my generation. We don't have to change anything for people that are 55 years of age or older. The longer we wait, the likelihood increases that we're going to have a debt crisis. Because right now we're paying historically low yields on American debt. If that goes up to just a normal historic number, and at some point it will, right, then we're going to have a debt crisis. We're going to be spending more money on servicing the debt than we are on our own military. We know that's coming, and we can't predict when. You just don't know when a fiscal crisis or a financial crisis or a debt crisis happens. And if you think you can't grow an economy with a debt crisis. So this is an important issue. It's a ticking time bomb. It's the most predictable crisis in American history. And I think we should have a deeper confidence on how to address that issue.
Right. Sure. Senator, I have what I hope you'll think is a substantive question regarding a headline this morning, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to see the papers, so I will tell you about it. There is news that Pfizer, one of the great iconic companies of America, could merge with a company called Allergan. Allergan is a company based in Ireland, moved there as part of an inversion. This transaction would effectively make Pfizer part of that company. Would be an inversion at a lower tax rate.
That's right.
We can talk about your tax policies and territorial, and perhaps moving towards a territorial tax system, but do you believe it is unpatriotic for a company like Pfizer to leave the country? And given that you're talking about your grandmother before and some of the issues around Medicare and Medicaid, the United States government would be, or is, I believe, the largest consumer, if you will, or payer to Pfizer through all sorts of things. Would you change the way we deal with drug companies that leave the country?
Yeah, look, we can rail all we want about how unpatriotic it is and how angry we are that Pfizer is selling to another company and they're going to move outside of America. But the bottom line is, and here's the truth, and no network should know that better than yours, they have a legal obligation to their shareholders to maximize profit, as long as they can do so legally. And what's happening here now is a reverse of the inversion. You now have foreign companies who can outbid any American bidder because they can bid higher on the purchase of these shares and create this merger because they have a better tax basis where they're going to go. And so this is an example of why what Obama has done with the IRS to prevent inversions doesn't work. All it's done is place American bidders, when a company becomes open, at a competitive disadvantage against a foreign bidder. And this is an example of it. We can stop this if we lower our corporate and business tax rate to a competitive rate like what I've proposed, 25% for all business income, including pass-through companies, but also if we move to a territorial system of taxation, so that you only pay taxes on it once. I believe we're the only major industrialized country that doesn't have a territorial system of taxation. We have a worldwide system. Right. This is just one more example. And look, it's not just the corporate headquarters and the name on the door that's moving. They're now starting to move some of the best jobs in these companies abroad as well to places like Ireland. We have to address this, and the best thing we can do is through tax policy. Do not create in our federal tax policies an incentive for companies to do this sort of thing, and that's what's happening.
Senator, let's talk a little bit about that. The idea of trying to change our tax code. That's something that has had some bipartisan support, at least when you're looking at the corporate tax code. We heard a lot of talk about it up until maybe 6 months ago, and then it kind of died out as the campaigns really started picking up. But when you look around the Senate, are there Democratic senators who are middle of the road who you think you could work with to get legislation like this passed in the Senate?
I do. I think the debate has always been, well, their argument is you need to raise a tax on something else in order to equal it out, and I think that's be counterproductive. So that's where the rub comes. The other point I make is it's not just the taxes on a C corporation. I think we also need to lower taxes on pass-throughs, which is where the vast majority of American business activity is happening. You know, I have a gentleman, I mentioned him last night, he's the dry cleaner where I take my clothes in Miami. He's an S-Corp, and he's a small business, and he's probably paying a much higher rate, in fact, almost guaranteed he's paying a higher rate than a chain-owned company down the street somewhere. And that's unfair. I think we have to make an equal playing field for pass-through companies where a lot of working Americans are drawing their income and have been placed at a competitive disadvantage now because of regulations, because they don't have access to community banking the way they once did, and because of the tax code that actually treats them differently. But do I think there's an opportunity to work on a bipartisan basis? I think so. It won't be easy. These debates are never easy, and it'll take a lot of work and some strong presidential leadership. That's one of the reasons I'm running for president. The Congress can help shape an agenda, but only a president can set it. And we need a president that makes tax reform, that makes America globally competitive, make that a priority.
Senator, thank you again for getting up so early to join us again after what we know was a long night. We really appreciate it, and we hope you'll join us again soon next time.
Thank you. I should have just stayed at the arena and just.
That might have been easier. Thank you, Senator.